Good morning, everyone. It's Janine Matthew here, so just bear with us. Have a great day, though.
Bob Proctor has been in the personal development industry for a very, very long time. Everywhere he goes, people love him. They just absolutely resonate with him. Hello and welcome. I want to congratulate you for making the decision to be here. And I think you should be looking really, really carefully at this topic today. Let me explain why. I'm Amy Gallagher, Bob Proctor's radio president in the Proctor Institute. And when I met Bob Proctor, I had a very successful practice going. I was a securities attorney. You know, I was taking companies public, taking banks public, doing IPO, emerging banks, that kind of thing. And I mentioned that just to let you know that I wasn't listed on the block. And here I found myself in a Bob Proctor seminar, and he said something that really stopped me in my tracks. It made me think. And what he made me think about was the results that I was getting in my life. And although I was getting good results, I almost anything that you might want to measure it by, when I really thought about it, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere near results, even I believe I was getting a lot. And I began to pay very close attention to what God was saying. Now, one thing led to another, and I became a part of these companies, and then I became a business partner. And this entire time, I kept studying and listening to what God was saying, and applying what He was teaching. And the results that I'm getting in my life today are so far removed from where I was then. My income was multiplied many, many times, and I was not earning a small amount at a time. And that's just one of the areas in my life that has expanded dramatically. So I mention this to bring to your attention that the rewards of really listening and applying what God is teaching are huge. But you know what? It is so easy to do. I have a mistake. It would be easy just to half listen to the seminar and get your action get on your tech tablets, you can't do that. I want to suggest that you give it your full attention, that you stop everything else that you're doing and listen really closely. And then get involved in doing what you discuss, because it will make all the difference in the world. I know it has to be. You're talking to someone that knows, someone that has for the last almost 15 years been solving this opposite thing and doing it. And doing it like it's together, we can the companies that operate all over the world. We see we're doing what we're teaching, and we're doing it very well. And you can do. You can multiply whatever you're presently doing. It's just doing it.
So my name's Phil Matthew. I'd just like to welcome you, invite you to sit back and relax. And I'm going to be talking to you a short while about the video that was just played. Bob Proctor and Sandy Gallagher, they're the owners of the Proctor Gallagher Institute, comes out of Canada. Bob Proctor, there was a lot of things said there. One thing that I could add to that is that he's been dedicated and studying this one topic of human potential and human development for almost 60 years, which makes him pretty unique. So human potential, human development and success, you're probably sitting there thinking or watching out there that, you know, how does that sort of relate to me? Well, it relates to pretty well everything that you are, everything that you have, everything that you want to become. Think about the house that you live in, the house you might want to live in. Think about the house that, you know, you could live in. Dream of. Think about the car that you're driving. Think about the car that you might want to drive. Maybe you've got a dream car. Think about where you want to travel, where you want to have fun, the places you want to go. Think about where you send your kids to school. Think about the idea of how much money you're going to have in retirement. Think about the person that you're going to become. So it's pretty well linked to everything. But what I want to do is I want to drill into a couple of areas. And if you can take these areas into account, if you can build these things into what you do, if you can get these areas right, then, you know, you can have whatever you want. So you're probably watching and thinking, well, that's a sweeping statement. You know, have whatever you want. What does that mean? Well, everything that you want in nature. And so whilst most people at the coffee tables and the water coolers, they don't talk about that stuff, I want to talk about that today. Have anything you want. What I want to do is give you some ideas that get you to think about your future. So my goal is to get you to think about your future. And the reason for that is you're in the business of your own life. You're the CEO of your own life. Life's important to you. Now, how do I know that? Because my life's important to me. So I know that your life's important to you. So you're in the business of your own life. Agreed? Yeah, you could nod your head if you think that. And you're the CEO of your own life. So whilst you might be in a job, or whilst you might have your own business, self-employed opportunity maybe, then you are in the business of your own life, the CEO of your own life. So what do you have to get right? What could you get right? Well, what I'm talking about, what I'm alluding to is growth, innovation, and awareness. Growth, innovation, and awareness. And again, they're not terms that are not often talked about around the coffee table and around the water cooler. But what I want to do is drill into that even further. And I'm going to use some words that most people don't talk about, but they're important words to use as it relates to what Bob Proctor, the #1 guy in the world on human potential and human development, talks about. And he built a product with that lady, Sandy Gallagher, called Thinking into Results. It's called Thinking into Results. Thinking into Results is it's a program that, well, can help you get whatever you want. It's a program that goes for 24 weeks and it's about 12 lessons. So it's a coach-driven, and it's a mentor-guided program. Bob Proctor being the coach and me, Phil Matthew, being the mentor. Why am I the mentor? Well, I know the caper. What sort of caper are we talking about? The Thinking into Results program. I know that inside out because I'm a certified Proctor Gallagher Institute facilitator. So the words that I want to talk about are the words mind, and then dig a bit deeper at the word conscious mind and the word subconscious mind. Because what I'm talking about today is unlocking your potential, the idea of unlocking your potential and dealing with some significant questions. And the question is, what stops people from making things happen? What stops people from making things happen? What can people do to prepare for a new economy? And what's stopping me? Why don't I just do it? Who out there has wanted to do something, but something inside that, just stops you from doing it? So you can see we started with human potential, human development, success, and we sort of dug into deeper layers of growth, innovation, and awareness. And then we've dug deeper into the issue of the mind, the conscious mind, and the subconscious mind, and how, in not understanding how that works, what happens is it blocks your potential. So what are the consequences of listening to what I'm about to say and not heeding them? Oh yeah, Phil, another day. Well, the consequences are tomorrow you wake up and guess what? Wake up and tomorrow is just the same. Tomorrow is the same as today. 1 year is the same as today. 3 years is the same as today. So nothing really changes. The consequences are that your life is on what we call autopilot. It's inevitable and it's predictable. So between where you are now and where you finish, that's it for you. So they're the consequences. So what I'm going to do is talk about this idea of understanding your potential and how to get what you want. And in talking about that, understanding your potential and how to get what you want, we have to talk about two words. And those two words would be the word wanting. You might want to write that down, and the word education. And so what happens is when we come onto the planet that people start wanting things for us. What do they want? They want us to have a good life. They want us to walk. They want us to talk. They want us to go to school. They're the things that people want. And so as young people, we pick up on that and then we start wanting things. And before long, what happens is that we're wanting to get that part-time job. We're wanting to get that car. We're wanting to get that full-time job, maybe that ideal job. We're wanting to might get into a relationship. We're wanting to get that roof over our head. And the byproduct of that is we start having to pay for the bills. That's like, for most people, almost all people, putting a square peg into a round hole. And then we get to the events of life. What are the events of life? That's the social vineyard. That's the fun. Where's the party? Where's the next engagement party? Where's the next wedding? Where's the next birthday party? Go on to the footy, the social vineyard of fun. And so this would be the typical process of wanting. And so education, where that starts, parents start wanting education for their kids. And so they start wanting them to, because they deem that to be the fast track to success. And so in the education process, what we have is we have a traditional education system. I'm going to call it standard education. I'm going to call it startup education. And that's the typical way the education system works. And so you can even dig deeper into a microcosm of that. And what can happen is that you can establish the fact that people will spend 10 to 20 years in this process here. They will spend anywhere from $20,000 to $400,000 in that process. And if we dug deeper into that and looked at the high school situation, 6 years of high school at a private or an independent school, that'd be $270,000. So 6 years of high school comes in at $270,000 at private and independent schools. And if we dug into the university education and we looked at an MBA, a Master of Business Administration in Dynamic Leadership, at 16.5 units, an MBA at 16 units, that comes in at around $40,000 and could take anywhere from 2 to 6 years. And what's that all for? That's all about getting results, because results always tell the truth, don't they? You might want to write that down. Results always tell the truth. But what are the results? The results are that if we look at our world, that people live limited lives. The reason is because they don't know how to unlock their potential. So what we're talking about is understanding your potential and how to get what you want. So what we need to do is we need to look at this from a different perspective. We need to look at the issue of wanting and education from a different perspective. We need to kickstart it from a new vantage point. Wanting and education. Because when you look at this situation here and how people get what they want, if you ask them, what happens is you'll discover that these people at some point had some sort of a goal. They had a goal to get that part-time job, get that car. And so these are what we call goals to get. You might want to write that down, goals to get. And so these are goals they think they can do. These are goals they know they can do. So they set goals they think they can do, they know they can do, they're goals to get. And so, as I said here, we need to look at it from a different vantage point. So from a vantage point of wanting, what we do is we create to unlock your potential, thinking into results, because results always tell the truth. What we need to do is think about a worthy ideal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about laws, universal laws. And one of the universal laws is the universal laws of polarity. And in talking about the universal law of polarity, we have to create the opposite of this situation to be able to unlock your potential. And if we're going to talk about a worthy ideal, what we need to do and understand that that's about big change. So it's not about little things. It's about big change. It's about setting up something that inspires you. Now, whilst I don't have the time here in this workshop, this meeting, this seminar, to this live event, to tell you how to impress, to how to internalize a worthy ideal, what I can talk about it is I can give you what the purpose of a worthy ideal is. Now, number one, you might want to write this down. The purpose of a worthy ideal is to go after something that you've never gone after before. Go after something that you've never gone after before. Point number two is the polar opposite of this. If you're going after something to get, you go after growth. So you might want to write that down, going after growth. What sort of growth? Personal growth. Point number three, in setting up a worthy ideal, is to set up an idea that excites you and scares you at the same time. Excites you because it's something that you want in the conscious mind. Scares you in the subconscious mind because it's something that you've never been there before. You're unfamiliar with it. So that's point number three. Point number four is that what's going to happen if you do that, what will happen is it's going to draw something out of you that you didn't know was there. So they're the 4 points. And that's the polar opposite of what these people do here. Goals to get. Get that car, get rid of that car. Get that job, get rid of that job. Get that house, get rid of that house. And so it's the polar opposite. And so what we have to do is we have to look at these numbers and these timeframes from a different point of view. And so if we had a look at education, and we reverse it from traditional, standard and startup, what we do is we look at education and from a universal point of view. Universal education. What's universal education? Universal education is the education of the future. And so if you want to tap into the education of the future, that's what thinking into results is all about. Universal education is fast-track education. So you're sitting there thinking, well, what's fast-track education? It's education that's effective. So what's effective education? It's advanced, it's elite. It's coach-driven. It's mentor-guided for a reasonable amount of time. And what happens, and the byproduct of that is you become richer in all areas of your life. The byproduct of that is you develop a whole new awareness. The byproduct of that is you tap into a whole new network of energy, an energy system. And so the dynamics and the dimensions of that is that it goes for 6 months. That's a reasonable amount of time. And so whilst you might do the program for the first time, and it takes 6 months, the actual intelligence, the way the information's organised, the way the information's directed, the intelligence of the program, you have it to use for a lifetime to apply to any issue that you have in your life, any human problem. What are human problems? Human problems relate to money and materials, people and relationships, relationship with your spouse or partner, your kids, how you feel about your outside appearance, how you feel about yourself on the inside. And so as far as the time frame goes, 6 months to do it the first time, and you have the intelligence for life. And so as far as the actual price points, is that whilst this might be a cost here, we have to reverse that. And here, what we need to do is to develop an asset. It has to be an investment. And so what we do is we say, well, we've got a midpoint level at $18,800. Now, there are levels above that and levels below that, but that's 18,800 gives you a median ballpark figure. And then what we do is we have a sweet spot. And so there's two observations that I've made of this type of education. It's education that sticks. You've got to get into education that sticks. And so the two observations that I'd have is that there's a price point that's affordable to everyone. That's good news. The second point, which is an even bigger point, is that you can have it set up a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too. Who likes that idea? You can have your cake and eat it too, meaning that imagine getting this type of education and it actually costs you nothing. Now, to do that, you have to be able to think in a certain way. So it's not about doing certain things as in education, it's about thinking about it a certain way. And so we teach you how to do that. Getting this education, it's like getting this education for nothing. That's having your cake and eat it too. Who likes that idea? Yeah, that's a great idea. And so what we've covered here is understanding your potential and how to get what you want. And it's through these two words, wanting an education. But what we need to do is think of it from a different perspective, using a universal law of polarities. What's a universal law of polarities? It's a universal law of opposites. Where there's an in, there's an out. Where there's a night, there's a day. Where there's an inside, there's an outside. Where there's a positive, there's a negative. Where there's a yin and a yang. And so we got to look at not just the logical, but we also have to look at the illogical. That's a universal law. What's a universal law? A universal law is something that happens for everyone, everywhere, in every instant. And we'll talk more about that shortly. So what I want to do is I want to talk about this idea of how to identify your next great opportunity. Who likes opportunity? Who likes opportunity? So how do you create opportunities? Where are opportunities formed? Where are they created? And what stops people from creating opportunities? And in talking about that, I need to talk about a couple of those words that I mentioned earlier. And those words are the mind. We need to touch on that, and we need to touch on the word paradigm. But first, a question. You might want to write this question down. It's a very powerful question. You might want to ask yourself this question today, next couple of days. What percentage of your potential are you accessing? What percentage of your potential are you accessing? Now, I first asked myself that about 30 years ago, and I didn't really know how to answer that. I didn't know who to go to talk about. But it's now become so much clearer to me. And it actually leads to other questions. But before we get to those other questions, let me tell you that there's researchers that have said that the human condition, human beings, they operate at 5 to 10% of their potential. Now, the byproduct of that is that if you're operating at 5 to 10% of your potential, you're leaving 90 to 95% of your potential on the table. And so that's where these other questions arise. Would it concern you if you were going to live from here until when you finish just using 5 to 10% of your potential, leaving 90 to 95% of your potential on the table? Would it concern you? The other question is, what does it cost you to live like that? What does it cost you just to operate just as a small portion of your potential? They're interesting questions, aren't they? And so that leads us into these two areas of the mind and the paradigm. Now, as far as the mind goes, what happens is that today in the world, We are living on surface modalities. Platitudes. And what do I mean by that? If you Google the word platitudes, you're going to find that there's a set of words, a frame of reference that's used so much over and over again that eventually we become desensitized to it and it doesn't mean anything. What do I mean by that? Well, as far as the mind goes, where the world's at, people will say to you, you need to have a good attitude. It's all about mindset. It's all about headspace. Who's heard that? And they'll say that if you put your mind to it, you can have whatever you want. These are the sorts of phrases. Now, you could take any area of life, whether it be business, whether it be entertainment, whether it be sport, and to try to build a picture of that, the picture that I built was that I thought, well, okay, I like AFL football and I like sport. So I thought about some different people along the way, and I thought about Rob Butters, who was the president of St Kilda. I thought about Ricky Nixon, who was an elite AFL manager. I thought about James Hird, who was captain Essendon, and he was premiership player and a Brownlow medalist and a coach of Essendon. Mark Thompson coached Geelong to multiple premierships. He coached Essendon as well, played in a couple of premierships. And Danny Frawley was a guy who was captain of St Kilda, coached Richmond, successful in the media. So all these people would have qualified at the elite level. And you would have said that, wow, those guys, they got the mindset, they've got the headspace. They're the sorts of people that when they put their mind to it, they can have whatever they want. But when we look at it, that's just the surface modality and platitude, because all those people ended up with issues related to, well, when I say all of them, some of them had different issues, but the overall problems that conspired were issues related to drugs or depression, issues related to, blowing up your business, blowing up your family, issues related to thinking about suicide, committing suicide. These were the issues that were created. And so what I'm saying is that when people are living on surface modalities and platitudes and they don't dig and deeper, then that's where these problems can conspire. And so it's not their fault and it's not anybody's fault. It's just our education system, that system of education that I was talking about. It's not taught because we just live on the surface modalities of the mind. The most popular word that's crept into our vocabulary lately is mindfulness. And so what they're talking to people about is this idea of becoming more aware of their thoughts. And they'll talk about surface modalities of mental, the mental fitness issues of, spending more time with yourself, taking time out with yourself, how to de-stress. And so that's a totally, totally different concept to what I'm talking about here in terms of unlocking your potential. Now, just touching on the paradigm, the number one guy in the world on human potential and human development, Bob Proctor, he wrote this book, You Were Born Rich, and he wrote it over 25 years ago. And so he says a paradigm, you've got to remember what we're trying to do here is identify the next great opportunity. So the question you have to ask yourself is, the opportunity outside you or is it inside you? Bob Proctor says that the paradigm, I'll ask you, who's heard of the word paradigm? What do you think a paradigm is? When I ask people what they think a paradigm is, they will say, well, it's a way of thinking, it's an abstract way of thinking. So Bob Proctor, he says that a paradigm, it's a thing that stops you from progressing. A paradigm is something that will stop you from progressing. It's the subconscious programs that control your behavior. A paradigms are subconscious programs that control your behavior. Paradigms are a multitude of habits that have almost exclusive control over our habitual behavior. And what's the problem with that? Human beings, almost all of our behavior is habitual. So paradigms are responsible for the way that you live, day by day, week by week, year by year. They're responsible for everything that you do, everything that you say, all your behaviors. They're responsible for the money that you earn, the money that you don't earn, the money that you could earn. So paradigms are a beast. But here's the good news. In Thinking into Results, in lesson 3, The Infinite Mind, what Bob Proctor does, he teaches you about how your paradigms were formed. So that's really, really useful information. And you can go to primary school, secondary school, you can go to university, tertiary, and they won't even get close to talking about this. So the chances of you coming across this sort of information are pretty slim. But I'm talking about here today. And so the other good thing Bob Proctor does, he says, I'm going to also show you how to form new paradigms, create new paradigms. Now, there's a lot of power behind that because that has dramatic consequences to your results. Remember, we're talking about results. Results always tell the truth. Are you getting results that you don't want? If you're getting results that you don't want, and the information that I'm talking about is resonating with you, if you sort of feel or you've got an intuition, this is interesting, and I don't want to go through my life on autopilot, predictably, inevitably, I do want to get the best out of myself, then we should talk and we should connect up. And you could go to my website, philipmatthew.com, PHILLIP, Matthew, MATTHEW.com, and you could connect up with there. There's a contact, and you could book in a discovery call. And so we would talk about that. And I would go through this. I would talk about what do you want? Why do you want it? How long have you wanted it? What are the consequences if you didn't get it? And talk about what are the obstacles between where you are now and where you think you want to go. And so that's the nature of what we would talk about, and we call that a discovery call. And what we need to do is to move into this idea of becoming a superpower. I want you to think about everything that's been said and done, all the information in the world, anything that's been invented. And what we want to do is try to simplify it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dumb it down to 5 different areas. And I call it the 5 circles. And so all the information, everything that's been said and done would relate to the body. That's our outside appearance. It would relate to the mind. That's anything that's been invented, all education, how we feel about ourselves on the inside, people and relationships, the relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you have with your spouse, your kids, money and materials is important. And also spirit. Some people think of spirit as religion. There are 6 religions. You can study them, or scientists would talk about it as energy. And so what we've done is we've dumbed down everything in the world, everything in life to 5 fundamental points. And what can happen is that we can then build the argument that 97% of the world has its focus here. This is where 97% of the world's focus here is. Look at me, look at my body, look at how good my body is. Look at my legs, look at my hair, look how good I look. People and relationships, look at my business card, look at my title, look at who I am. So it's ego driven, it's driven by the ego. It's driven by competition. Look how much money I've got. Look how much money I earn. Look at my house. Look at my car. Look at my skidoo. And so it's driven by the ego and it's driven by competition. That's where 97% of the world focuses. And it's only 3% over here, the mind and the spirit. And so there was a doctor in 1934, Dr. Thurman Fleet, worked in San Antonio, Texas, worked in the healing arts, the holistic arts. He says, we've got a huge problem. He says, we're treating people physically, we're treating symptoms, and until we treat the whole person, there's going to be no health. So he said, we're treating people physically, meaning treating the body. We're treating symptoms, meaning people's egos. And until we treat the whole person, there's going to be no health, meaning the mind and the spirit. Treating people mentally and spiritually, there's going to be no health. And so that was a great observation on his part. And he made multiple observations, which I'm going to go through a couple more. Now, we can also have a set of numbers here that 97% of the world They will work a lifetime, but they don't end up with any money. Remember that retirement issue, which is a great issue for people. It consumes people's thinking, well, how much money am I going to have in retirement? Whilst they might be rich consumers along the way, enjoying that social vineyard of fun, going to all those events, and arguably fitting that square peg into a round hole, they will work a lifetime, not end up with any money. Now, 30% of people here, this is what the lawyers tell us, even though they enter into one of the most sacred relationships called marriage, 30% of them don't make it. And then what happens, they go and get married again, another percentage of them, they get married again, and 60% of them fail the second time around. I said to a lawyer one day, I said, how's that possible? He said, Phil, they just keep doing the same thing. They keep making the same mistakes. And that's a reflection of their paradigms, their subconscious programs that control their behavior. That's what's at play there. Here, 96% of people, this is the dietitians tell us that, whilst people have these goals to release weight, they don't actually get there. So the diet industry is full of showing you pictures of the before and after photos, but they never ever show you the after photos. And in the after photos, in almost all situations, what happens is people's weight is like a thermostat and it just comes back to where it was originally. And the reason for that is that the diet industry treats symptoms. It treats symptoms. It doesn't go to the root cause. And so that's what Bob Proctor is all about. He's about helping you get to the root cause and not treating the symptoms. Now, Dr. Thurman Fleet, he was the guy that said we've got a great problem. We're treating people physically, we're treating symptoms, and until we treat the whole person, there's going to be no help. So what I want to do is I just want to touch on an exercise, just have a little bit of fun here. So what I want you to do is to think about this issue of money and materials. Think about a large amount of money, a large pile of money. Think about a pile of money. Think about Tats Lotto. Think about $1 million. Think about a $50 note, a $5 note. Think about people in relationships. Think about your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife. Think about, your kids and uncles and aunties. So you can think about that. Think about the body. Think about the physical body and arms and legs and fingers and toes. And so you can think about that. But here's the question you've got to ask yourself. What does the mind look like? What does your mind look like? Now, most people think about the brain, but the brain's no more your mind than your fingernail. And so Dr. Thurman Fleet come to another realization, and he said, we've got another great problem. He said, nobody knows what the mind looks like. Nobody's ever seen the mind. And he said, I'm going to create an image to help us understand it better. I'm going to create an image to work with, to help us gain clarity and help us to eliminate confusion about what the mind looks like. And so what he did was he drew a circle and he drew another circle and he connected them up with a couple of little strokes sticking out. He put couple of strokes up here. He drew a line between it and he called it the stick person. He gave it a name. Now you might have drawn something like this when you were younger. And so what he was endeavouring to do was, point number one is to bring order to the mind. You might want to write that down, to bring order to the mind. And his second point was to actually show people how the creative process actually works, which I'm going to show you shortly, so stand by. And so when we look at that there, if we think about a chocolate cake has a recipe, there's a set of ingredients. But if you left the eggs out, you get a different result. It's not the same. Like a golf swing, if you were going to set up a golf swing, and there's a series of steps involved in that, but if you didn't do that right, the ball would end up trajectorying in a totally different direction. The whole point is you get a different result. So if you don't know the ingredients, if you don't know the recipe, and it's the same with your results here. Results always tell the truth. Are you getting results that you don't want? So what we need to do is to build out a recipe, and that's what Dr. Thurman Fleet did. So he said, let this little part here, this little circle represent your body, let this big circle represent your mind, and let these parts here represent your senses, your taste, your touch, your hearing, your sight, and your smell. So these are your senses to the outside world. And so he then said, let this part of your mind here represent your conscious mind. Let this part represent your subconscious mind. Remember, I referred earlier in our conversation, and I talked about I'm going to use words that most people don't use. I use the word mind, conscious mind, subconscious mind, and obviously the word paradigm enters as well. And he said, let this part of your mind here, the conscious mind, be your knowledgeable part of your mind, the knowledgeable mind, the educated mind. So when we go through that traditional education system, that startup education, that standard education system, that's what we're talking about. This is where you gather information in the conscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind is different. It's very different. This is your emotional mind. This is your doing mind. It's a very different beast. And so right there, we have a composite of the mind. Dr. Thurman Fleet's intention was to help people gain clarity and eliminate confusion and to create an image that we could work with so that we could understand the mind. And so that when you understand this as your mind, you can start to understand everybody else's mind. Now, Bob Proctor, the #1 guy on human potential and human development, he says it this way. He said that there's a power that flows to us and through us. There's an energy that flows to us and through us. And it gives us the ability to do something. And so what we start to do is we start to get an understanding of the function of the mind. There's an energy and a power that flows to us and through us. And so what I want to raise the point number 3 that Dr. Thurman Fleet observed, remembering that he observed that if we're treating people physically, we're treating symptoms, and until we treat the whole person, there's going to be no health. He then made the observation that nobody's seen the mind. Point number 3, he said that the function of the mind is that we think in pictures. Now, you might want to write that down. We think in pictures. It's a very important point. If you ask people what the function of the mind is, they can't tell you. Bob Proctor, he says it this way. He says, there's an energy and a power that flows to us and through us, and it gives us the ability to do something. What do you think that would be? Well, I'll kick it off with a question. So the question is, what's the highest function that we're capable of? What's the highest function that you're capable of? And so what we need to do is we need to get our head around the capability of the mind. What is the capability of the mind? What's the highest function that we're capable of? The highest function that we, the human beings, are capable of is thinking. But here's the thing. Did you know that you could learn to think, like you can learn to type, like you can learn to play the piano? See, that's not covered in primary school or secondary school or university or tertiary or an MBA. They don't cover that. And so it's a blind spot and it's a blight on our education system. What's the good news? The good news is we teach you how to think into thinking in results. Remember, I said it's effective education. It's coach-driven. It's mentor-guided. It goes for a reasonable amount of time. It helps you become richer in all areas of your life. It helps you tap into a new network advantage, new awareness. Bob Proctor says there's a power that flows to us and through us, and it gives us the ability to think. But what are the muscles of our mind? What are the muscles in our mind? Has anybody ever asked you that before? And so the muscles in our mind and why they're important is our perception, our will, imagination, intuition, our memory, and our reason. And so if we just explore those, our memory, which is very, very powerful, our reasoning, that's our perspective, that's our ability to think, our intuition, that's our ability to feel. It's our ability to feel things unseen. We can intuit things that are unseen. Somebody's looking at us and we can sense it. Our imagination, which is our ability to create and dream. Our will is our ability to focus and concentrate. And our perception is our point of view. And these are the muscles of the mind. Here. Now, why is that important? Well, to try to build a picture of that, think about the body. And Think about the idea of taking your body for some exercise. So you can go for a walk. We all understand that. But you can escalate that and you can take your body to a gym where they've got some machines. And so it's an escalation. And so what happens is that you then might go to a gymnasium a couple of times a week. And then you can escalate that even further and you can get a personal trainer. And the personal trainer comes along, maybe 3 sessions a week, 3 hours a week, increases the intensity, increases the duration. And what happens? Your body starts to shift and change. And you can now do more. It's got a greater ability to get results that you couldn't get before. Make sense? Now you can escalate that to another level. And what you can do is that you might want to become a triathlete. You might want to become a person who does the, not just the triathletes, but the marathon runners. And so what has to happen is that you've got to increase your training load, maybe up to 15 hours a week. You might want to increase that and become an elite Olympian. And to do that, you employ a coach. Make sense? And so you go through, you might do that for 15, 20, 25 hours a week. So you're escalating the process with the body. You might take that to become a bodybuilder and you start to work on the muscles of your mind and you accentuate the muscles of your mind. Bob Proctor says it this way. He said you could have a barbell and you could be lifting 25 kilograms, 30 kilograms, 35 kilograms, 35 kilograms. You're building muscles in your body. But if you had this arm in a sling and you just left it there for a week, a month, 6 months, what happens to this part? It develops atrophy and it starts to fade away. And so we can understand that in a logical way from the point of view of the body. But we're asleep to it in terms of the muscles of the mind. We don't understand that we can exercise the muscles of the mind exactly the same way, and we can escalate the process. And that's what Thinking and Results does. There's 12 lessons, so we escalate the process where each lesson, there's 12 lessons, mutate and nuance together. And so what I do is I call that an ATM. And so most people might think ATM stands for automatic teller machine, which relates to money. Well, guess what? Your mind can help you have more money, an ATM. And that stands for, and you might want to write this down, amplifying the mind. Who's ever told you that you can amplify the mind? Think about an amplifier where it's got 10 little pegs, 10 little things, and you increase the volume on an amplifier and the sound intensifies and it gets louder. And you can do that with your mind. You can intensify the mind. That's what we teach in Thinking and Results. We've got the 12 lessons, and each lesson is like turning up the volume on your mind. And also, we can relate to the idea of growth, innovation, and awareness, which is what I said at the start. And so a mat, when I think about a mat, I think about standing on a mat. It's like a foundation. But like with everything, we want to go deeper, we want to go richer. And so you think about what would be a rich foundation. And so you look at any building that's constructed. I think about Q1 in Queensland, and I remember having a look at the foundations, and they just went like, it was like, 50, 100, 150 meters into the ground, building a rich and a deep foundation. And so as it is with our life, you are the CEO of your own life. You're in the business of your own life. So build a deep and rich foundation, a mat. I call it a mind-altering toolbox. That's what Thinking the Results is, a mind-altering toolbox. And whilst in standard education, you can go and get an MBA, a Master of Business Administration, you can get an MBA with Thinking in the Results. But it stands for a mind-body alignment, a mind-body alignment. I said to you, Dr. Thurman Fleet was going to show us how to bring order to the mind, point number 2, but how does that creative process actually work? Well, the creative process works like this, that there's a power that flows to us and through us, and it gives us the ability to think. What happens is that at this level here, we can come up with a thought, we can come up with an idea in our conscious mind. And so you might have a thought of, I want to make more money. I want to make another $10,000 this year. I want to make another $20,000. I want to make another $30,000. You want to make more money. You want to better yourself. It's an aspirational idea. Might want to have better relationships. Some of your relationships might be in the toilet, maybe with your husband or your wife or your spouse or your partner, and you want to have better relationships, maybe with your kids. Maybe it's something to do with your outside appearance and how much weight that you carry. You want to get better results, so you can have that thought. But here's the problem. A lot of people have those thoughts, and they can have those thoughts for a year or 3 years or 5 years, but nothing ever happens. They say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Nothing ever happens. They tell themselves that they're going to do this and they're going to do that, but they can't make it happen. What stops people from making things happen? They don't know how. They don't know what their mind looks like. That's one thing, and they don't know how the creative process works. And if you don't know how the creative process works, then you're not going to be able to create new economies. Make sense? And so here's the problem here, that when there's a power that flows to us and through us, it gives us the ability to think, and we have these ideas. What happens is that we get stuck and we start getting these doubts, worries, insecurities. Doubts, worries, and insecurities. This is how most people live. Why? These senses here, taste, touch, hearing, sight, and smell, these are your outside, these are your senses. And so what happens is that you're programmed from the outside in. Remember I said this is the problem, the ego, the competition. You're programmed to live from the outside in. Big problem. If and when you understand how the mind functions, you don't want to be controlled by the outside world. If and when you understand how the mind functions, you don't want to be controlled by the outside world. You want to control the outside world. If you do understand how the mind functions, you control the outside world. Most people do not understand how the mind functions, so they're controlled by the outside world, and it creates these doubts, worries, and insecurities. What's the result of that? Failure, disruption, and distraction. Think about these senses here: taste, touch, hearing, sight, and smell. You live through your senses. You're programmed through your senses. What did I just say? You live through your senses. You're programmed through your senses. And so what that means is the moment you wake up in the morning, a bit of noise, maybe it's the radio, maybe it's the television, maybe it's something on your phone goes off, maybe you get onto social media, the texting, the emails, you're looking at your phone, and you are totally distracted, you're disrupted.